Our next session is looking at faith, culture and mental health at work, something we really haven't touched on before. So I'd very much like to welcome Louise Commode from Jamie, the mental health service for the Jewish community, who is joined by Dewani Shah from Clifford Chance, Will van der Haar from the Mind and Soul Foundation, and Saba Galani, founder of the Muslim Mind Collaborative. Louise, over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome to this afternoon's session of what has already been such an interesting afternoon with lots of thought-provoking discussion and great learnings to share as well. We are going to be exploring the connection between faith, culture and mental health, looking at how faiths have different practices that can benefit and support positive mental health, but also how faiths may hold some stigma towards opening up about mental health, and vitally, what workplaces can do to overcome this. So I'm Louise Commode, Director of Services and Occupational Therapist at Jamie, a mental health charity that supports the Jewish community. And we're joined today by our panellists, Dewani, Will and Saba. So I'm just going to ask you all to introduce yourself and tell us briefly your background and experience in mental health. So I will start with you, Dewani.
Hi, Louise. Thank you very much for that. My name is Dewani. I work as a lawyer at Clifford Chance, and I am the co-chair and founder of the Hindu, Sikh, Jain, and Buddhist Society, which is a faith group amongst, 3 other societies that the firm supports. So we have the Islam Society, the HSJB, which I head currently. We've got the Jewish Society and the Christian Society. And, the work that we do within these faith groups is varied between a charity work, supporting colleagues, with their mental health, offering pretty much a community and a platform to voice their opinions, and then over and about that, celebrate events surrounded around festivals or like faith auspicious dates. So just speaking a bit about myself before I go into the work that the society does. I've been born and brought up in Mumbai, India, and I moved to London about 2 years ago, and I realized that when you're away, from your comfort environment, you kind of look at seeking more support from spirituality or faith or religion or whatever it is, that suits your perspective or whatever it is that you want to call it, because it grounds you in so many ways. And ever since I moved to London and started working at Clifford Chance, we realized that there was a lot of scope in terms of work, to make sure that colleagues from all faiths, felt like they were part of the fabric of the firm. And, from both a mental health support perspective as well as inclusivity, we found that the results of having active faith groups have been great. And that's, most like feedback that we've received over the last 2 years. In terms of, what work the society does, we host, various events throughout the year, and our biggest event being the Diwali event. And of course, we've got this little video, which unfortunately we're unable to play, during the session, but we'll follow it up, after that, just so that anybody working in a corporate organization can get an idea of what a corporate faith event, looks like. And yeah, that was it about myself. I will go into, the other bits once Saba and Will have had a chance to introduce themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dewani. So Will, could you introduce yourself, just give us a bit background about your work in experience in faith and mental health?
So I'm Will van der Haar. I've been an Anglican priest for the last 20 years in London, and I was very impacted by the London bombings in 2005 and suffered from complex PTSD. Then I became very passionate about the fact that many people in the church community didn't disclose that they had suffered from mental health issues before. At that time, there was a significant amount of stigma in the church, I think, and in society really about mental health. And so we started a charity with a consultant psychiatrist I was at Cambridge with, and we've added to our number a number of psychiatrists and psychologists who have a Christian faith and look specifically about how we can help churches find great mental health outcomes for Christians. So addressing issues around stigma, but also improving access to treatments. And we do that through quite a significant online platform called Mind and Soul Foundation. And I also work as a corporate coach and work with companies and businesses to try and help them to engage in emotional health and well-being, particularly of senior leaders. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Will. And
Saba.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Saba Gilani. I'm the Chief Exec of the Better Community Business Network, which is a Muslim-led grant-giving organisation. We incubate projects and programmes, and one of our kind of, I guess, products from that has been the Muslim Mind Collaborative. So I come very much from the third sector background, but it is looking at how we can, create collaborations and partnerships and really upskill community organizations and entities. So for me, my kind of inspiration behind this was about how we look at kind of long-term sustainable solutions for Muslim communities, put a spotlight on obviously mental health and mental well-being within the Muslim communities, but also look at ways that we can upskill various different organizations and entities in how they create better access really to mental health support provisions for those from various different faith communities.
Thank you so much. We're really lucky to have you all here for this discussion. So we'll dive in, Duani, with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how belonging and inclusion foster positive mental health and well-being for employees?
Thanks, Louise. So like I touched upon, in the introduction, so I'll just talk a bit about what Clifford Chance does as a firm, and then go into my personal, experience about, how being a practicing Hindu has helped, in my overall well-being and mental health. And I'm assuming that goes, across all faiths. So we have 4 groups at Clifford Chance, and specifically for the Hindu, Sikh, Jain, and Buddhist society, this is a common faith group for 4 faiths. And, again, the idea was to keep it inclusive, to support, to kind of look at this as a platform to help mental health. And when I say mental health, it does not, it goes into a slightly deeper territory, because at the end of it, like most corporate jobs, we are, into stressful, sometimes like high pressure work and environment, and making sure that there's a community to support that helps, with your overall mental health and well-being. And not just that, but it's also about, making sure that there's events which are, inclusive enough, where you're not just talking about, work, but also talking about faith and, how that goes on to provide like overall nourishment to your day-to-day, if I can put it like that. And this is something which is not open just to Clifford Chance employees, but for example, we've got the Jewish Society, where, we're a member of the Canary Wharf Chaplaincy, where we actually invite people, from across Canary Wharf to come participate in prayers, which again, opens up conversations about so many things that I think aren't really talked about as much. And it kind of deep dives into how faith is helpful and kind of offers a platform for everybody to talk about. Another example of that is, for instance, we just had, a meetup a few weeks back where we spoke about Buddhism and the history of Buddhism and where it stemmed from. And we found that was something that was very interesting even to people who didn't practice the Buddhist way of life, because it's again something that's very intrinsically connected to all of the other faiths. And then we followed that up with a play, which was this play called The Father and the Assassin. It's a great play. And again, we thought that was a great opportunity, for members to interact with each other, ask very, very relevant questions, which aren't just related to your, work per se, but it is obviously very beneficial to work eventually, because, once you come to a point where you have that stillness of mind and that clarity of thought, and you're not perturbed by so many other things that can affect you in your day-to-day, or at least you have a place to voice it. we found that that has gone, a great way to supporting overall mental health and inclusivity. And I just actually found this really interesting quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which is, a religious book as a lot of people know it, but it's actually really just a depiction of war and what, the human mind goes through when it's going through war. And I found it so relevant, even today. And there's this quote which somebody utters while they're in war, and they're in conversation with Krishna, who you would have heard of. Krishna is one of the main gods that Hindus worship, and they say to Krishna that, look, the mind is always turbulent or agitated or restless and unyielding, and the most difficult thing is to control the mind, because it's almost like you can't control the wind and you can't control the mind. And it's really about the conversations between Krishna and this other character Arjuna, which is about how you attain stillness of mind. And just going back to your question, Lewis, is to like how faith can support mental health and well-being. I think that there is so much to take away from your scriptures, even in your modern day-to-day. And it's great to see that Clifford Chance as a firm is now supporting that, and we're obviously getting very great feedback um, about these initiatives which are being taken within the firm.
Thank you so much, Dhvani. I think it's so interesting, that idea of having a voice and building communities, which we know are such important aspects of mental health support. Just quickly, I wonder if you wanted to share a little bit about your personal experience of mental health and how that's intersected with faith and beliefs before we move on.
Yeah, of course. So I was mentioning to you, Louise, earlier, and to Jamie as well. I feel like with each person, if every person has a different relationship with religion or spirituality, as you call it, and I've realized that there's no like right or wrong way of doing this, so long as you feel connected to whatever it is that your idea of faith is. So as a practicing Hindu, for me, I go to Gita classes, which are essentially classes that are curated, to learn about the Bhagavad Gita, to see what it is that we can draw, from the conversations that have happened between the principal characters during war. And I find it so relevant even today. And other than that, of course, there's been a lot of work that we've been doing through the society. So some of it includes, for instance, the charity work that we've been undertaking with two organizations. They're called Akshay Patra and Nani Kali, which I think personally I find very calming, because I know that other than the rigmarole that I have, which is my job, which is of course great and very important. There's also meaning to like the day to day, which I think we're all looking for, somewhere down the line.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. Will, I'm going to come on and move to you. Would you please tell us a bit about mental health stigma that you've experienced within Christianity?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a priest in the Anglican Church for a really long time. And in 2005, I was working in Edgware Road, and I was caught up really in the London bombings. And it was, I think, the largest terrorist incident in the UK since the war. And I was walking past the station, and I could see that there was a need for some support, and I offered my sort of support to the local police officers who were sort of first responders. And I opened up a small church hall we had available that became the sort of main triage base for the emergency services. At that point, we didn't know what had happened, but I was doing the normal things that I guess Anglican vicars do, offering tea and refreshments and use of the toilets, and also a chance to pray and talk. I didn't really realize what a significant impact it was going to have on my own mental health. And about 3 months after that event, I suffered quite a significant anxiety-based breakdown, where I suffered from a huge amount of panic attacks and acute anxiety and hyperarousal, and I needed some therapy and some medication to help me recover from that. I think what was very interesting was, for me as a priest, I've not really come across many people who were in the context of the church, and the church I was involved in at the time had about 2,500 regular members on a Sunday, so it's quite a big church, but no one had ever come to talk to me about mental health issues. And so I remember thinking, am I the only person who has faith and also has mental health issues? And I think what was quite interesting was within our leadership team, well-meaning as they were, a couple of the other priests in the church took an approach. One was quite a spiritual approach, to assume that something spiritual was happening to me. And the other one was to take quite a physical approach and assume that actually I was just exhausted and I needed to rest. And it was actually my secular doctor who really helped me understand that I was suffering from a psychological experience. It wasn't necessarily spiritual or physical, although you could say in the big scheme, there was some sort of more sort of disturbance to it. And it helped me to create a more integrated idea of what I was experiencing, which also reduced the stigma that I was feeling. And so that was really a catalyst to me then beginning to open up the conversation around faith and mental health in the church. And as soon as we started talking about it, of course, a significant amount of people started coming forward saying, I actually have depression, I have anxiety, but I felt like it wasn't safe to start talking about it here because I thought I was supposed to be joyful. I thought I was supposed to be trusting, or I thought I was supposed to be, calm, or whatever it happened to be. And so helping people to realize that emotions just are, that they're not an indication of a kind of spiritual disposition necessarily, I think is really helpful. And developing and encouraging a deeper conversation about mental health within the context of faith is also really healthy, and we're sort of trying to enable people to get to have a twofold approach.
I think Will has frozen for me. I don't know if he's frozen for you both as well, Dhwani and Saba. Yeah. Okay. We will hopefully be able to get Will back for the rest of that answer. So I will move on to Saba. Would you be able to give us a bit of information about your research into Muslim mental health and what the key findings were of that research?
Sure. So I set up the Muslim Mind Collaborative to ultimately create a space of shared learning and exchange. And we are a membership organisation that works to seek kind of better outcomes for Muslim mental health. So the research undertaken by the organisation that I head up, Better Community Business Network, points to really a silent epidemic. The Hidden Survivors Report surveyed Muslims between the ages of 18 to 30 and found that 4 in 5 young Muslims said that they had suffered from mental health struggles. It also disclosed that 64% had experienced suicidal thoughts, and the survey also highlighted that young Muslims are 3 times more likely to look for support from their friends than actually accessing mental health support provisions. Over 90% who had accessed help previously believed it was important for mental health services to display faith and culture sensitivity. And so as British Muslims, we see that they face many disadvantages and structural barriers to equality. And this is in part due to their racial makeup as overwhelmingly from ethnic minority backgrounds, but also because of the prevalence of Islamophobia. Half of Muslim UK households are living in poverty and deprivation compared to 18% of the general UK population. So we know that Muslims also have poorer outcomes to health and employment and housing. So given the stigma attached to mental health in Muslim communities and the inequalities and barriers in seeking and accessing healthcare, and indeed even the anxieties clinicians themselves express in working with Muslim families, it appears to be a problem that will only grow in complexity and severity. So the context of British Muslim mental health contains further nuances, given the very nature of anti-Muslim prejudice. And even though there is yet legally undefined concept of Islamophobia, we need to look at how this plays out itself in public life, the media, and other institutions. So research suggests that the level of hostility Muslims face is greater than other minority groups. A report by the Citizens UK Commission on Islam, Participation and Public Life also found that more than half of Britons now regard Islam, the religion itself generally, as distinct from Islamic extremism and as a threat to the UK. So these statistics are soberingly mirror the lived experiences of British Muslims, with a more recent report from EHRC, which finds that 70% of Muslims said that they had specifically experienced religion-based prejudice. And the same report suggests that these trends are going upwards for younger Muslims. And an ICM poll undertaken in 2015 found that Muslims feel religious prejudice is increasing over time.
Thank you so much. And I wonder, what do you feel Islam could present positive mental health in context of workplace as well? What could workplaces learn from that?
So, I mean, some of the questions, and actually, next slide to the person that's kindly taking care of the technical side, is just as some questions for us to contemplate over when thinking about the sort of systems and structures there to support. So, how can employers make the workplace more inclusive of those with faith-based practices and religious observance? Is this being done structurally through provisions of prayer spaces, for example, and areas of contemplation, socially and culturally, through making visible Muslims really feel confident in their identity and in their workplace? So Islamic belief and practice is often cited as a source of peace, comfort, and a means of coping against adversity for much of the Muslim world. So positive religious coping is associated with reduced levels of depression and the use of an internalized spiritual belief system to provide strategies that promote hope and resilience. And Muslim clients are also more likely to use religious coping techniques than individuals from most other religious groups in the UK. Psychotherapy and religious teachings can therefore be seen as complementary, though its ability to provide meaning and a sense of well-being, social support, and the use of positive self-talk. So Islam can therefore be a tool for Muslims for better coping mechanisms and more resilience, and can be leveraged in therapeutic methods.
Thank you so much. It's so important. There's a complex relationship, isn't there, between mental health and faith and culture. And it's a complex relationship often, but it's so important that we see those protective factors that we know are important to mental health as well. So I'm going to move on to some questions. We've got some really good questions from the audience. So the first one is, how can businesses strike the balance between respecting faith practices and where barriers and stigma might exist, while also, upholding those responsibilities around mental health and well-being? So really about striking that balance and where employees, I guess, their sort of responsibilities lie with that. So open up to the three of you if you've got some thoughts.
Saba, sorry, do you want to take that?
I'd like to, I guess, make some sort of recommendations and suggestions in how we can look at sort of solutions, specifically when we look at obviously Muslim identity and how obviously workplaces can respond. So mental health support generally in the workplace should, I believe, be in line with general policy statements and guidelines that promote the use of culturally appropriate treatments for service users from ethnic minority as well as faith communities. I think there needs to be more done around kind of embedding the religious and cultural competency within mental health services, so that there is a kind of move and a shift towards Muslims feeling understood, respected, accepted, and cared for when seeking access to help and support. Faith and I think spiritual belief generally play a really important and positive role in helping people to deal with obviously their mental health struggles. So, how do we normalize that and use a whole range of religious tools to address mental health struggles in a way that is very person-centric, I think is also really important. There are ample opportunities around, I guess, training and actually, investing in professional development as well as religious literacy programs that do operate. I'm mindful that there is one that Cardiff University run. It's a free online course and it's very comprehensive called Understanding Muslim Mental Health. And that might be a good place to sort of start from to gain a better understanding into some of the complexities, and really, looking at where there are organizations and vehicles in which some of those dialogues can take place and those encounters and exchanges between Muslims in workplaces, but also even looking at kind of Islamic counseling practices and how that can improve religious literacy, both in mainstream mental health services, but also the environment that we want to see, within our workplaces.
Thank you so much. And Dhvani, this may be one for you. And Will, thank you for being able to join us again. I know you had a bit of a technical issue there. So question here is, how can businesses use mental health and well-being as a way to connect and engage employees across different faiths and cultures? And I think really importantly, thinking about the fact that everyone's, faith, people and groups within faiths can be incredibly diverse in itself and have different relationships with faiths as well. So yeah, just your thoughts on that would be great.
Absolutely. I think I'd answer that. I mean, not just from an employee, well-being perspective, but also from a business perspective with a very live example that we've got going on. So we're actually planning the Clifford Chance Diwali event that I just mentioned at the beginning. So this is one of our largest, annual faith events. And in fact, this year, given the response that we had last year, we're also turning that into a client event. So that is a great example of, not just faith and inclusivity, and overall, mental health and well-being, but also supporting the business, which kind of goes, a long way to ensure that, there's benefits not just on the personal front, but they're also supported by your corporate aspirations in so many ways, which and of course we do understand that. Like I'll give you an example of that is for instance, Clifford Chance does not really give any faith or religion based holidays as of now, and obviously that's a policy that's being reviewed over a period of time. But the idea is, again, to just make sure that employees can take their leave, and there's always support to make sure that employees who practice a particular faith are given holidays during like their religious festivals, or if they need to like lock some time off, then they're kind of given that support internally.
Absolutely.
So
thank you so much. I think there's something really important about seeing it as a positive, not that we're having to add or accommodate, but actually creating a more inclusive and more productive workforce with that have be able to bring your whole self to work means all of this as well. Really clear kind of messages around building community, people having a voice and connection as well. Will, any final thoughts from you before we close?
I just think it's so important that faith is valued in the workplace, every faith, and that actually that it's not a better way of getting well, but actually that faith support your mental health recovery, and that many people of faith suffer a sort of diminishment in the workplace and can't talk about the faith benefits. And I think we need to move beyond that and recognise the huge benefits that faith plays to mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today.
Bye. Thank you very much.
And thank you to all of you and Louise as well for facilitating that session. Once again, I feel there is so much more that we can talk about when it comes to faith. So this is just the beginning of our conversation. The next session coming up is all about harnessing the power of data to support staff mental well-being, and we'll be looking at some latest research. So join us in a couple of minutes.